In this module, we will continue discussing experimental methods allowing to determine the reaction order. Another strategy in determining reaction orders is known as the method of initial rates. This method involves measuring the instantaneous reaction rate right at the start of the reaction. To effectively utilize this method, we conduct a series of experiments, each with varying initial concentrations of one or more reactants. By analyzing these initial rates under different initial concentration conditions, we can deduce the reaction order with respect to each reactant. Suppose we are analyzing the reaction orders in a chemical reaction of two reactants A and B. The initial rate of the reaction, denoted as V0, is then a function of the initial concentrations of A and B. V0 equals K times the initial concentration of A in the power of Na times the initial concentration of B in the power of Nb. To facilitate a graphical analysis, we take logarithms, typically a decimal one, of both sides of this equation. This allows us to convert concentrations in the powers of reaction orders to products of reaction orders and logarithms of the reactant concentration. In the method of initial rates, to establish the reaction order with respect to a specific reactant, we primarily follow two approaches. First, we can modify the concentration of the chosen reactant while keeping the concentrations of all other substances constant. This allows us to observe how changes in this single reactant's concentration affect the initial reaction rate. Alternatively, we can isolate the reactant of interest by ensuring that all other substances are present in large excess. This isolation helps in simplifying the rate law and focusing on the impact of the reactant under study on the reaction rate. When employing the method of initial rates, regardless of the approach taken, the process involves plotting the logarithms of the initial rates against the logarithms of the initial concentrations of the reactant under investigation. For a series of initial concentrations, this plot should yield a straight line. The slope of this line is crucial as it directly corresponds to the reaction order with respect to the reactant being studied. In this slide, we will show an example that will help us to understand how to determine the reaction order using the method of initial rates. In this example, the focus is on examining the recombination of iodine atoms in the gas phase in the presence of argon. The objective is to evaluate the orders of reactants in this reaction using the method of initial rates. The first figure illustrates this relationship of the logarithm of the reaction rate against the logarithm of the concentration of iodine while keeping the concentration of argon constant. The slope of the lines in this graph directly indicates the reaction order with respect to iodine. In our example, the slope is found to be 2, signifying that the reaction is second order with respect to iodine. Moreover, the intercept of this graph at the point where the logarithm of the iodine concentration equals 0 gives us the logarithm of the effective rate constant for each initial concentration of argon. This effective rate constant is proportional to the concentration of argon in the power of its reaction order. The second figure presents a plot of the logarithm of these effective rate constants against the logarithm of the initial concentration of argon. The slope of this line is 1, which indicates that the reaction is first order with respect to argon. This example demonstrates how the method of initial rates can be applied to determine the order of a reaction with respect to each reactant. Furthermore, by analyzing the intercepts of the appropriate logarithmic plots, we can also evaluate the value of the rate constant. One more approach to determining reaction orders is the integration method. This approach involves assuming a specific order of reaction and then predicting how the concentrations of reactants change over time. This expected temporal evolution of reactant concentration for assumed reaction orders is provided by integrated rate laws. The model's predictions are then compared with experimental data to verify if the assumed reaction order accurately describes the reaction kinetics. This method is generally suitable for reactions involving a single reactant, and the isolation method might be necessary to simplify multi-reactant systems. A key aspect of the integration method is the linearization of concentration time data. This involves transforming the data into a linear form that corresponds to zeroth, first, or second order reactions. For a zeroth order reaction, the concentration of the reactant decreases linearly with time. In the case of a first order reaction, the natural logarithm of the concentration decreases linearly with time. For a second order reaction of one reactant, the inverse of the concentration increases linearly with time. This method of linearization is a powerful tool, allowing us to deduce both the reaction order and the rate constant from experimental data in a straightforward manner. By plotting concentration time data in these respective linearized forms, we can confirm the reaction order. The slope of these plots provides the rate constant, while the intercept gives the initial concentration if it is also needs to be determined. To conclude this module, we will briefly explain the half-life method for determining reaction orders. This method is generally suitable for reactions involving a single reactant and employs the concept of the half-life of a reaction. The latter is the time required for the concentration of a reactant to decrease to half of its initial value. The half-life of a reaction is not just a measure of reaction speed, but it also provides insights into the reaction's order. By examining how the half-life changes with the initial concentration of a reactant, we can deduce the order of the reaction. The relationship between the logarithm of half-life and the logarithm of the initial concentration of a reactant for different reaction orders is expressed by this equation. We can utilize this relation by plotting the logarithm of the half-life against the logarithm of the initial concentration and examining the slope of the line obtained. It is equal to 1 minus the reaction order with respect to the analyzed reactant.